You are Locked On Braves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Braves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. Grant McAuley, Jake Mastroianni with you after a crazy night of baseball at Truist Park as the Braves opened up a 3-game series against the Chicago Cubs, a wild card hopeful in the National League. They're trying to find their way into October. The Braves, meanwhile, trying to put the finishing touches on perhaps home field advantage throughout the postseason. So 2 clubs with something to play for, and 2 clubs that played an extremely crazy game. One team was in control for most of it, and the other decided to go ahead and take over in the late innings, and the one that took over, that would be the Atlanta Braves. But they got an assist in this one for the go-ahead runs that scored, and we're going to talk all about it. A 7-6 Braves win over the Cubs, the homecoming of Dansby Swanson. We'll get into that. And, of course, we'll get you set up for Game 2 of the series, which comes your way on Wednesday. Before we get started with any of that, I want to remind you to subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta. Hit that bell. You get notification every time we drop a new episode of the show. Make sure you leave us a comment, a like. We appreciate all of those likes and most of those comments, and we try to get back to as many as we can or discuss them here on the show. And make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves. Jake's got lots of great stuff for you all season long as well, including every episode of this postcast. Jake, welcome into what was a night that I think we felt like we were going to have a different conversation, but the Braves were able to snatch one from the jaws of defeat, or quite simply, take some charity, as the case was, with a drop fly ball in the 8th inning.
Had the headline written up, another ugly loss post-clinch. I mean, it seemed like that's what it was going to be the case. So great fight here. Not the best played game for the Braves this year, but certainly one of the most exciting and dramatic with the way that it ended.
No, and this is the thing I think with baseball is it is unpredictable. And sometimes you play a game that you have no business winning, and you do. And sometimes you play a game that you shouldn't lose, and somehow you do. And it all brings me back to that great saying. And you already know where this is going, Jake, and probably many of you watching out there. You can win ugly. You can't lose pretty. And the Braves, they'll take wins, whatever they look like, here to close out the regular season, and they'll take all the wins they can get in October. Game 157, though, goes in the win column. Braves improved to 101-56 on the year, 7 runs, 8 hits, no errors, 5 men left aboard. The Cubs, they got the first 6 runs of the game, and that's all they got, and they came up 1 short, 82-75. I stopped short of calling this a back-breaking loss for the Cubs, but they can ill afford to lose a game that they felt like they should have all rights to based on the way they had played for the first at least 6 innings of this one. But 6 runs, 13 hits, an error. It proved very costly. 9 men left aboard. Brad Hand, the winner in relief, is 5-2. Drew Smiley, and we'll get to his very crazy up-and-down inning as well, 11-10. He takes a bit of a tough luck loss, though, and Bryce Elder his 31st save. Game lasted 2 hours, 49 minutes, 40,151 on hand to see it. We're going to get back to the starting pitching and Bryce Elder's appearance and all of that, but I think, Jake, we kind of have to start at the end, if that makes sense here. The Braves were down by a 6-0 score heading into the 6th inning. They scored 3 times. Kevin Pillar, a historic home run, the 300th of the year for the Braves, but it was just 1 run. Then the Braves, they got an RBI single from Matt Olson, a run-scoring double from Marcell Ozuna, a 2-run homer from Ronald Acuna Jr. came in the 7th, and then, as they say, all hell broke loose in the 8th inning, it would appear. Sean Murphy's drop fly ball. Drew Smiley was on the mound. 2 walks, 2 wild pitches, 2 strikeouts, and then the fly ball to Seiya Suzuki out in right field that I don't know if he lost it in lights or what happened to him, but 2 runs came across, and the Braves went ahead. That's about as crazy as you can draw up a comeback win for the Braves, their largest comeback in 3 seasons.
Yeah, certainly. Like I said, one of the most dramatic games of the year when you talk about their biggest comeback of the season or, in a long time, but just the way you draw it up, nothing through the first 5 innings of this game. Justin Steele, who's going to finish top 3, top 4 in the NL Cy Young voting. Yeah. He looked like he was about to have, a brilliant outing. And that's one thing about this offense we talk about all the time. It's relentless. You got to get them out 27 times. And you give them opportunities and they come through and they knock him out in the 6th inning, and then they go to work on that bullpen. It's why, again, we all know this. We talk about it all the time. This offense is just so dangerous, especially in a postseason format where they can get you anytime and get back in a game. They're never out of it. I joked. I thought this game was over. It looked like it was going to be another ugly loss post-clinch, but you really just cannot count this offense out of a game. So fun in the way that it happened. Nothing first half of the game, and then just, getting on fire towards the end, coming back, and then getting that error to score those 2 runs. Love seeing the excitement from the guys in the dugout. I mean, you want to see them get locked in right now. It's a last chance you got at the end of the season before the postseason starts. So good win for them.
Yeah, and you want to take, again, all the wins that you can get. And I think for Sean Murphy here, I mean, you can really file this away as sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And I think he said something just as much in his post-game comments after this one where you put the ball in play, you never really know what can happen. And I think, Jake, one of the big differences between the 2022 Braves and the 2023 club is they have put the ball in play far more this year than they have really in any season in recent memory. It was like a paradigm shift from a power hitting club with a lot of strikeouts to an even better power hitting club that doesn't strike out as much. And that's one of those situations where Matt Olson works the walk. There were a couple of ugly at bats and a strikeout for Marcell Ozuna in particular in that eighth inning that looked like, okay, well, maybe Drew Smyly's going to work his way out of this. But the wild pitches, another walk. Forrest Wall comes in. He takes second base. You got runners second and third. Big at bat for Sean Murphy. He has struggled quite a bit here in the second half. That's been well documented. But lifting that fly ball out to right field, and Suzuki, he seemed like he had it until the last possible second when it fell in right field, and the Braves had 2 runs just like that. And I guess we have to kind of get into it from the Cubs side of things too. This is the kind of game and the kind of loss that I don't want to throw around the term demoralizing too much because I know they've had some challenges here in September, but this is one in the final week that is going to sting for quite a bit, I would imagine.
Certainly. And, I didn't know this. I heard this on the broadcast talking about they don't own the tiebreaker against any of the other teams that are around them. So,
Right.
yeah, this definitely hurts in that regard. A tough loss for them. Good thing I guess you could say from the Cubs perspective is, Braves, we don't really know who's throwing in game 3 of this. We do now know that Vines is going to throw in the second one. So you got an opportunity to certainly get back in this series and win these next 2 games. But yeah, how are you going to pick yourselves back up after this one? A game, like you said, should have had, and you really just don't have a lot of margin for error right now because of those tiebreakers.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, I mean, they had their Cy Young hopeful on the mound. I mean, this is the way you draw it up. You got to come into a tough city and a tough town like Atlanta is, and a tough draw for any starting pitcher with this lineup, as you mentioned, and you give him a big lead, and he pretty much did his job, but the bullpen was unable to keep the Braves offense at bay, and then an untimely error, not that there's really ever a great time for him. That certainly undid things in the 8th inning, made it just a little bit worse. So that was the Braves comeback. I think that is what we want to lead with. We're going to talk a little bit about Bryce Elder's start, though, which was a bit troubling, a bit concerning, whatever you want to call it. But we'll get into that after I tell you about one of our great sponsors for this episode of the Braves Postcast, because it's brought to you by LinkedIn Sales. And if you're struggling to close deals and cold calls aren't doing the trick, overcome those challenges with technology that translates comprehensive, high-quality buyer data into real-time insights. LinkedIn has built the first deep sales platform with the next generation of LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and right now you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon. That is linkedin.com/lockedon for a 60-day free trial of LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Now, the Braves were able to, I think, navigate their way through a season in which their starting rotation was patchwork at times. But one man who had stepped into a very important role throughout the course of the season was Bryce Elder, an all-star in the first half, an incredibly up and down second half where you could say he just hasn't been able to recapture that magic that he had in becoming an all-star. And this was another example of, I think, Jake, what has become problematic for him, and it's walks in particular. Command has been a real issue. 3 2/3 innings, 7 hits, 5 earned runs, 4 walks, couple of strikeouts. He had a second inning that by all rights should have been over, and the Cubs shouldn't have gotten any runs off of him. But unfortunately, with a 2-out stolen base attempt by Dansby Swanson, things got a little weird out at second base. Ozzie Albies, rather than tag Dansby, who was kind of behind into the side of him, decided to throw to third where there wasn't a play. And then the Cubs came through with a couple of base hits. One was a swinging bunt by Yan Gomes, and then an RBI single that followed that made it 2-0 very quickly. But then as you get into the 3rd and 4th innings, walks became a problem again. And that is a problem for the Braves insofar as this is somebody that they're going to have to count on, I think, to start a game in the postseason. If you got Max Fried and Spencer Strider, no Charlie Morton pretty much opens the door for Bryce Elder. And this has been a really challenging second half, to make a long story short.
It has. And look, it feels more like Bryce Elder at the beginning of last year, not trusting his stuff, not having that overall command. And I thought he looked really good that first inning. He was locating great. You wonder what effect that second inning has. And look, like you said, should have been out of it, but you got to move on and you got to make better pitches. Also could be some fatigue. He hasn't thrown this many innings in a full season before. So perhaps that's coming in, but whatever it is, like you said, Braves are going to need him. And the biggest thing for him is he has to be able to command those pitches, and he's got to be able to live on the edges. And again, that second inning just got away from, and it just felt like it carried over into the next inning. And you got to be able to work past that and be able to keep your team in the game. Because as you see, offense doesn't need much. You just got to keep them right there for as long as you can. So likely going to get one more outing to try to fine tune things, but the Braves are going to need him at some point.
Yeah, and I think you have to give him that one more outing. I mean, I would. And I don't know if it's confidence builder, whatever you want to call it, but you bring up a good point, and I think it's one that a lot of people have kind of looked at and pointed to and maybe wondered about as you went on with some of these younger pitchers throughout the season. They're going to reach a level where they're going to go so far over the innings that they've already thrown or previously thrown in their career that you just kind of have to wonder what effect is that going to have. I think the Braves have tried to do their best throughout the month of September to not really overwork anybody, but this rotation at times, and we're seeing this again in the postseason, the injuries and the inconsistency, whatever the case is, can put a tax on the bullpen, and you're going to have somebody covering these innings. And Bryce Elder had done a really nice job in that first half, but he did put a strain on the bullpen tonight. Jackson Stevens, again, this is, I think, the third time he's done this for Atlanta since getting called back up. 2 1/3 innings of one-run ball. I thought he did a nice job bridging the gap. Pierce Johnson, a scoreless inning with a couple of strikeouts. Brad Hand with a scoreless inning. And Raisel Iglesias comes in and nails down the save with a couple of strikeouts, allowing just the one hit in that one as well. So the Braves bullpen definitely did its job. And we know how the postseason is. And you know that if you're Brian Snitker or any manager, really, if you get in trouble the way that Bryce Elder did, even in the third inning, you might see the quicker hook than we are seeing in a game like this. So it would behoove Bryce Elder to be able to limit those walks because, as we've heard so many times, and base runners equal rallies in the postseason. That can be just one walk. It can be one seeing eye single. It can be whatever the case may be. You're going to have a quicker trigger if you're Brian Snitker, and we've seen this in the past, to go ahead and go into that bullpen, and you can't afford to do that time and time and time and time again in the regular season. Postseason, though, is a little bit different animal, if that all makes sense.
Certainly, there's going to be a shorter leash in the postseason, especially for your third, fourth starter. A guy like Fried or Strider, you might give them a little bit longer leash. Even a guy like Morton because of his experience. But for a guy like Bryce Elder, if he doesn't have it early, you got to pull the hook, and that's where Kyle Wright's going to come into play big, and some of those other guys to try to bridge the gap. But what a great job by this bullpen tonight! I mean, you're down 6-0. This game, seemingly kind of somewhat felt over, even with this Braves offense you have. But in order for them to come back and win, you knew the bullpen had to put up zeros the rest of the way, and it's exactly what they did. So great job here by the bullpen, like you said, and it gives you the confidence if one of these guys doesn't have it and you got to pull the plug early, you got that bullpen that you can go to hopefully keep you in a game and give this offense a chance.
Yeah, and I think it was nice to see, Pierce Johnson and Brad Hand. Johnson has thrown extremely well since coming over from Colorado, but for Hand, who's more of that lefty specialist type, which is harder to exist when you have the 3-batter minimum, it was good to see him come in and kind of clean up that 8th inning and get out of it, because I think the Braves are going to be counting on him to do that alongside A.J. Minters, their southpaw options out of the bullpen. So good to see a few of those things. And, of course, for Raisel Iglesias, being able to come right in, nail down that save, that is going to be a formula for success in the postseason as well. The Braves scored the final 7 runs of the game, coming in the 6th, 7th, and 8th innings, and they also have surpassed the 300 homer plateau. I mentioned that earlier. It came off the bat of Kevin Pillar in the 6th inning, the 300th home run for the Braves. 301, well, that belonged to Ronald Acuna Jr., his 41st of the year, and it got the Braves to within a run, and he just continues to find a way to, even on a night in which the swings didn't look altogether that great in the first 3 plate appearances, he finds himself able to get a ball over the right field wall. And with his power, that's just the kind of difference that he can make. And it's one of the many things that makes him an MVP candidate. Braves are the first team in National League history to hit 300 or more home runs in a single season. They are now just 6 behind the Minnesota Twins record of 307 set back in 2019. And the Braves have, 5 games left to break that record, averaging 2 homers a game. By some very simple math, I think the Braves have a pretty good shot at this record among the many that they have set for the franchise this season. We'll talk a little bit about Wednesday's game 2 of this series. Before we do, though, want to let you know about our other great sponsor for this episode of the Braves Postcast, which is brought to you by Jace Medical. And Jace Medical, things are simple. You go online, fill out a form, then you get those prescriptions, those life-saving medications right to your door. The Jace case gives you peace of mind because no one wants to be left just hoping to have access to their medication in the case of an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Right now, you can save more than $360 from Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout. That's jacemedical.com, JASEmedical.com. All right, Braves are going to be looking to pick up a win behind Darius Vines, who I feel like has thrown pretty well since coming up from AAA. He's been used a little bit in long relief. He also got that start back at Coors Field. I think as much as anything, Jake, you're just trying to get 5 good innings out of Darius Vines to set up Atlanta to go to work against Jamison Taillon, who has had a very challenging season in Chicago. He has an ERA just over 5. He's 8-10 on the year.
Yeah, he's been up and down here lately, and he's due for a bad one this time around. So hopefully that's the case against the Braves, somebody who struggled giving up home runs this year against a team that hits a lot of home runs. So it certainly seems like a good recipe for the Braves. And as you said, with Vines, just got to get some innings. Somebody has to give you some innings in this series where you don't really know. Again, we don't know who's pitching on Wednesday yet either. So again, just need somebody to give you some innings. And Vines has been good. He's worked in relief since coming back up. His last start in Gwinnett also came in relief, but it was 6 shutout innings. So he's been throwing the ball really well lately. But again, the key we talked about, got to limit the walks, get some innings, and help this Braves bullpen out.
It's very similar to Bryce Elder. This is not somebody that's going to overpower you. Vines does it with his changeup, and I think Bryce Elder, it's more so about the slider. But the fastball command, kind of living on those margins and being able to really locate is going to be important for Darius Vines against the Chicago Cubs lineup that we saw. Can pile up some runs, can put the ball in play and do the things it needs to do. It wasn't on the lineup, the loss in game 1 of the series. It was, as much as anything, maybe a little bit on the defense, and the Braves being able to work over Chicago's bullpen as well. Some other good news in this, if you're looking for storylines heading into Wednesday's game, Braves' magic number for home field advantage in the National League, so for the NLCS over the Dodgers, is down to 1, as Los Angeles lost game 1 of its doubleheader against the Rockies. And, of course, the Braves beat the Cubs, and the magic number for home field advantage throughout the World Series is down to 2 over the Baltimore Orioles. So one of the other storylines to watch as Darius Vines faces off against Jamison Taillon, 7:20 p.m. Eastern Time, is the first pitch from Truist Park in Game 2 on Wednesday. That'll wrap things up for this edition of the Braves Postcast. As always, we appreciate you riding along with us here each and every time we do one of these. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta. Click that bell. You'll get notified every time we drop a new episode. Leave us those comments and likes. If you are a first-time viewer, we appreciate you checking us out. Be sure to tell a friend as well. It helps the show grow. And make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. Once again, Atlanta with a thrilling comeback win, 7-6 over the Chicago Cubs. For Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. We will catch you next time. And until then, so long, everyone.